Let's start. Kia ora. Roopu Rongo-ma-Tane, and the topic we chose and we'll be discussing today is based on the Kura Kaupapa Māori model, which is the Māori curriculum in the primary level. There will be three main points that we'll be covering today, which are the problems Māori faced that resulted in transformative practice, how Māori responded to these problems, and why Māori responded the way they did. So to start off with, the first question, which was the problems faced by Māori, which resulted in the formation of the Kura Kaupapa Māori.
Through the research that I've done, one of the problems that Māori faced was that the mainstream curriculum did not account for or te reo Māori or many aspects of Māori culture or beliefs, and the parents were concerned that their children's use of Māori would be lost if they attended English medium schools. So one of the problems was the loss of language in a primary school level.
One of the other problems that I thought they faced was that once Māori children had attended their kohanga play centres and had been totally immersed in the culture, they were old enough to move into the primary school level, and the curriculum that was taught in New Zealand mainstream schooling didn't make enough allowances towards the Māori children's cultural needs, and they also felt that they couldn't be Māori in the New Zealand mainstream schooling setting, and they weren't able to be free in speaking Māori.
Definitely, there's like a gap, wasn't there, from early childhood to primary. Definitely.
Yeah, okay. Another problem that they were faced with was that the parents resisted the mainstream policies, and they weren't happy with the state of the education at the time for their children. And from this it resulted in parents and communities creating and developing the Kura Kaupapa Māori movement, which kind of leads on to our next question of how Māori responded to these problems.
Yeah, I think the main thing for me, the way that Māori responded was from the parents and the community. Responded by obviously establishing the first one in 1985. But it was established from the funding from the parents and community, resources, everything was done by the Māori parents and community. It wasn't until later that the government got themselves started funding the Kura Kaupapa movement. Due to the parents being involved right from the start, they had a significant influence over what was being taught in the class, the administration side of things, the materials being used. They also had a greater influence over the learning outcomes for children, so they could keep a closer eye on actually what was going on within their models.
As well as that, they responded by initiating and conducting their own research on educational requirements for Māori, which meant that they were more aware of what was needed for their children to succeed, and a Māori-centred approach which put Māori aspirations and preferences and practices at the centre.
A direct response that actually addresses these problems faced by Māori are the 6 principles, which are tino rangatiratanga, which is the principle of relative autonomy, taonga tuku iko, which is cultural aspirations principle, ako, which is the principle of reciprocal learning, kia piki ake i ngā raru o te kāinga, which is the mediation of socio-economic and home difficulties principle, whānau, and kaupapa, which is the collective vision philosophy. We're going to address our last point, which was why Māori responded in the way they did.
Yeah, I think they responded in the way that they did by keeping the Kura Kaupapa Māori model, the initiative, very close to them, and keeping a close eye on them, on the model, because they're possibly a bit sceptical, a bit sick of the dominant culture always trying to take over their culture and trust their ideas and policies on the mainstream education, and by keeping it close and conducting their own research and things like that, they get a strong sense of their own direction, and they can develop and change these models to benefit Māori in the future.
I think they responded by developing the kura kaupapa Māori because Māori found that New Zealand mainstream schooling didn't allow for the Māori knowledge and their culture, traditions and practices, so they had to form their own schooling system and setting, and it also meant that in that setting they could be Māori freely.
Be themselves,
Yeah.
I think that from the establishment of kura kaupapa Māori, it was a way for Māori to try and decolonise themselves. So they were just trying to take back what was taken from them, like their language, their tikanga, like beliefs and things like that. It was just a way for Māori to govern themselves, which leads to one of the principles of tino rangatiratanga, which is the principle of relative autonomy.
Having control over their own life. Definitely. That concludes. I hope it was very informative. Ka kite.
So